We began
Yeah.
by offering our most humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of our beloved Gurus. Unto Sri Guru Pad Padmanitya Vishta Om Vishnupad Asto Tarasati Susimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada and Sri Guru Pad Padmanitya Vishta Om Vishnupad Asto Tarasati Susimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayana Swami Maharaj.
You don't want to sit.
No, I'm not used to it.
You have to get used to it.
I know, but once you surrender to the chair, you become a chairwala from then on.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not a chairwala yet. I'm dreading the day when I become a chairwala.
I want to be more comfortable.
Chairwala.
Yeah.
That means, like a man of the chair. Every program you got to be in a chair, over the back, hunched over in pain. I'm fighting. I'm not letting the old man in yet. Wish we had a better. Anyway. Okay, so we left off. We're speaking initially from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's small booklet, his speech, entitled Notes on the Bhagavad. I remember a long time ago it was published, and I thought it was a different title, like Reflections or Thoughts on the Bhagavad, something like that. But in any case, as I mentioned before, I have it in hard copy, and I have it in PDF. And it's also, if you have folio, Acharya folio, you can get it there. It's very, very good to read. And yesterday we discussed the conceptions, or that's good for me, the unique methodology of delivery of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, considering the audience, the time, the place, and the audience that he was speaking to. And this is very important for anyone who is trying to understand and absorb our conceptions and our philosophy, and anyone who's trying to present it. Sometimes we get so absorbed in the esoterica of our philosophy, we find it very difficult, or we're not effective communicators about what we actually believe in. And we rely on technical words in Sanskrit, which sound impressive, but which leave the audience a little bewildered. And sometimes we mistake the capacity to quote shlokas and cite evidences for understanding and realization. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, not that we shouldn't present these things, not that we shouldn't remember and learn these things, but remembering who our audience is. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in this book, which we can't get, I'm not going to get into in depth. If we go into it in depth, we won't get through it. It's actually that profound. So I'm going to be skimming it. But in every place, you'll see how he takes the very complicated conceptions or the deep thoughts of Srila Vyasadeva and makes them accessible to people that have no idea about what he is initially talking about. But what he's trying to do is bring them in. So that was what we did yesterday, and I don't want to linger in that mood. Rather, I want to get into the subject matter itself. In his introduction, he gives, before he gets into the content, he does speak briefly about the three subject matters of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. And then later on, he's going to get into it again in more depth. But listen to what he says here. Have you ever tried to explain this to anybody? Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, the necessity of it, what it's all about? Because actually, these are the keystones of our philosophy. Now, I just want to mention one thing. This morning, we were hearing from Tridani Maharaj, and he was advocating the emphasis on Lila Kata, which of course, we do have to go deep, and we have to really become eager to understand Rasa Tattva. We absolutely have to. But Rasa Tattva is part of Sambandha Tattva. It's one element. And without a firm grounding in Sambandha, or I'm going to let him describe it, and all these other elements of tattva, then when we do hear the Lila Katha, the pastimes of Krishna, we may fall into the trap of thinking them mundane or ordinary. Or we may fall into the trap of considering ourselves eligible to enter into them before we actually are. Now there's a little confusion here. Some people say that because we're not eligible to enter into this Leela yet, that we're not eligible to hear about it. That's the mistake. Because it's the method of hearing about this Katha that gives us the eligibility to enter into it. The mistake that people make is when they think that they're on the level of the people that they are reading about. And they try to enter into Katha and Leela that they may not be qualified for, like the very intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna. But even that, our acharyas, as long as we're reading and hearing in the way and in the manner in which our acharyas have presented it to us, then we're always safe. The one thing that struck me about Srila Gurudev when I first saw him and heard from him was 1997. It was Northern California. We were staying at the Marriott Hotel, a nice suite. And the lectures were in this little room above a bowling alley. And it was a nice crowd, actually, really nice crowd. A lot of old godbrothers, pretty big crowd. There's a beautiful video of it. But his Katha was different than I had ever heard before, because he was speaking about the pastimes of Krishna, but he's speaking about them in such a joyful and chaste way. And then interspersing that with beautiful bhajans. He would have his daughters over in the corner singing beautiful bhajans. And then all of us were given sheets and were allowed to sing these songs too. And Gurudev's own moods, such high moods and such depth of praying that he had, his very presence was uplifting the entire room. And this is the real key to entering into the secret mysteries of the Bhagavatam. Not simply by study, independent study, not simply by sadhana, but being in the presence and hearing the transcendental sound vibration of a pure devotee. This is what reveals the Bhagavatam. This is the secret. So let's hear what he says about Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. He says, the whole of this incomparable Srimad Bhagavatam teaches us, according to our great Chaitanya, he calls him the Eastern Savior, the three great truths which comprise the absolute religion of man. Okay, so all religions that we study have these three components. He's going to, at some place, call them the cardinal points of all religion. Our Nadia preacher calls them Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. Now listen to this. This is how he describes it. That is the relation between the Creator and the created, the duty of man to God, and the prospects for humanity. This is what religion is all about. The relationship between the Creator and His creation, which is us, our duty to God, and our greatest prospect. Beautiful, simple language. Don't have to get into the complexity of it, just in a very simple way. He says, in these three words is summed up the whole ocean of human knowledge as far as it has been explored up to this era of human progress. These are the cardinal points of religion. And the whole Bhagavat, as we are taught by Sri Chaitanya, is an explanation, both by precept and example, of these three great points. So whether you are reading the first canto, the 10th canto, the 12th canto, every canto has these elements in them. They're inseparable. They're all part of one tattva. They're all interdependent and interrelated. You can't have one without the other. except when you perfect, you don't need avideya anymore as a process of perfection, but then avideya becomes your natural function. So, sambandha avideya prayojan. So, the relation between the Creator and His creation, the duty of man to God, and the prospects for humanity. Now he's going to get into a little bit more detail about sambandha. He says that throughout the Bhagavad teaches us there's only one God without a second. That's very important because so many people say, "This is not my God. My God is," and then they go on and on and on. And they think that if you're in a different religion, you're a different God. But who is in himself, full in himself, and will remain the same. Time and space, which prescribe conditions to the created objects, are much below his supreme spiritual nature, which is unconditioned and absolute. Now he's beginning to lay out what is the nature of that God. And this is what really makes the Bhagavatam quite unique. Even from the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, these are philosophical aphorisms that give us some idea of the nature of God, but who is God as a person? What is his abode? What is his spiritual realm? This is the secret purview of the Bhagavatam itself. This is the revelation there, and this is really what distinguishes it from not only all other Vedic literature, but all other religions. What other religion can actually claim to give a description of God and his realm? There are hints. You can read the prayers in the Old Testament, the Psalms, etc., of Solomon, etc., and you might find some hint of the beauty of God, but no detail. And the Christian theology is completely speculative. Paintings of Michelangelo on the Sistine Chapel, great muscular, bearded fellow, reaching down to mankind, more like Lord Brahma than Krishna. There was one German scholar back in the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, when they began their preaching there. Germany was a ripe field back at that time. And there was one scholar who, being presented with this Vedic conception, said, Krishna must be God. He said, after all my study, this is the only thing that really makes sense of who God would be. Because if God is really God, then he's completely free of having to do anything but enjoy. The underlings have responsibility for overseeing, for maintenance, for all the other tasks. But if God is truly God, he should be completely free and independent and happy to enjoy. So, one God. So, what about, why are we here? Why don't we know that God? Maya intervenes between us and God as long as we are not spiritual. And when we are able to break off our bonds, we, even in this mortal frame, learn to communicate in our spiritual nature with the unconditioned and absolute. Maya does not mean a false thing, only but it means concealment of the eternal truth. This is another key point of Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. Most modern spiritualists are of an impersonal nature, and they teach that this world is false, illusion, and that it actually has no existence. But that runs them into all kinds of philosophical complications. We used to preach, and whenever we run a Mayavad, he said, oh, it's all illusion, it's all unreal, and we'd say, it's all unreal? Yep, it's all illusion. Well, then just give me your wallet. What? Yeah, it's illusion. Give me your wallet and all your money. Well, do you believe what you believe or not? Well, yeah, I do. Well, give me your wallet. And sometimes they would.
Take the money out before, huh?
They were caught by their own ridiculous philosophy. We don't say that it's unreal. It's part of God's creation. What's unreal is our misconception of it and our identification that we came from this and that we are this. It's a thing, it's an energy that covers our spiritual nature. And it manifests many temporary forms. that are reflections, imperfect reflections, of the spiritual reality. The ancient Greeks, their philosophers, had a statement, because they were connected with India, they had some connection, and they had the idea, as above, so below. Their idea that this world was an imperfect shadow version of the spiritual realm. And that is what we believe as well. And this energy is what it covers us. So he says the creation is not Maya itself, but is subject to that principle. The true idealist must be a dualist also. He must believe all that he perceives as nature created by God, full of spiritual essence and relations, but he must not believe the outward appearance to be the truth. So, this is what we just said, I kind of anticipated. So, he says that nature is eternally spiritual, and this is how we share our conception. True nature is eternally spiritual, but the intervention of Maya makes it gross and material. And in our progress, we try to shake off this gross idea, and we seek eternal union with God in the spiritual nature. And the Bhagavad teaches us this relation between man and God. This is called Sambandha. Later on, he's going to get into much more detail, but he's giving an overview here. Then Abhideya, the second great principle, is the principle of duty. Man must spiritually worship his God, or her God. There are three ways, now this is good, there are three ways in which the Creator is worshipped by the created. One is Brahman, one is Paramatma, and one is Bhagavan. And this is the beautiful reconciliation that the Bhagavad does. Is it in the third chapter? Yeah, third chapter. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam. Second chapter?
Yeah.
Third chapter. Brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shantite. Third chapter.
1 to 11.
1 to 11?
First canto, second chapter, 11th verse.
It's not the third canto.
First canto.
First canto.
Second chapter.
What
Second
chapter?
First
Second.
canto, chapter 2, text 11.
All right. Anyway, it's in the Bhagavatam. The verse is correct. And what it does is that it reconciles all the various progressive conceptions of spirituality. The Bhagavatam doesn't have to fight over this idea or that idea. There is an impersonal, homogeneous form of spiritual energy, which some people, that's the extent of their realization. The spiritual energy, the light of the Lord. And some people have that realization and prefer to enter and merge into that. There's another form of the Lord, which is the localized Supreme Spirit within the heart of every living being. And then there's the individual, unique personality of God in his full glory and form. And that form, which is the highest truth of the Bhagavatam, reconciles all the others. They're all included in that. He says that those who worship God as infinitely great in the principle of admiration, called by the name of Brahman. This infinitely great, indefinable spiritual energy is known as Brahman. And the process by which you achieve that is called Gyan, or knowledge. He's going to get into these processes in more depth later. But those who worship God as the universal soul in the principle of spiritual union will give him the name Paramatma. And the process for that is yoga. By controlling the senses, by taking one's focus and meditation and removing it from everything outward and directing it inward, one after a very long time may be able to perceive that form of the Lord within the heart. And those who worship God as all in all, with their heart, body, and strength, style him as Bhagavan. And the last principle is Bhakti. So the Gyan, Yoga, and Bhakti. But as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in his commentaries of Bhagavad Gita, even these systems of jnana and yoga are dependent on bhakti for their fruition. But that comes later. So the superiority of the Bhagavatam consists in uniting all of these sorts of theistic worship into one excellent principle. This is the unique thing. And this, we're going to find out, is very important because when the sages of Naimisharanya questioned Sutta Goswami, one of their questions was, "Oh Sutta, there are so many Vedic scriptures, and in all of them there are different recommendations, different conceptions. It's very confusing. So please tell us, what is the essence of all of these instructions? What's the highest principle? And explain that in an easily understandable way so that our hearts may be satisfied. What is that all-encompassing greatest conception that reconciles and includes all others?" And that is what he's explaining here. So, he says that the principle of bhakti passes through 5 distinct stages in the course of its development into its highest and purest form. Do you have any idea what those might be?
No.
Yeah. So, but see how he's really introducing this in a very subtle and
All accommodating.
appealing way too, you know? Yeah.
All accommodating.
Yeah, that there will be 5 stages that you may go through. And this is like Mahaprabhu's instruction in conversation with Ramananda Roy. Ramananda Roy is discussing these in step by step. In one sense, each stage is completely satisfying to that devotee who is in that stage, and they want nothing else. But Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, but if you look from an objective point of view, you will understand that the higher you go, the greater the capacity for interacting with the Lord and giving Him greater and greater satisfaction. And when you realize, and the way Bhaktivinoda Thakur will describe the nature of love, this mood of I only want to serve you, I only want to please you, there's no contradiction in wanting to be in the highest rasa. It's not a selfish motive, because to be in the highest rasa means the capacity to give the greatest pleasure to Krishna. And the eligibility to be in that stage is to have that mentality, that I want nothing but to give Krishna the greatest and broadest happiness. So then he says something. Okay.
May I ask, so Santaras is then also part of this 5?
Yes.
In what way is there any service then?
Because Shantaras is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is the beginning when Mahaprabhu was accepted. That this is when the quality of love of God is there and complete freedom of all attachment to the material world. The first 2 symptoms are there. But what's not there is any form of
Any active engagement.
yeah, and any form of deep attachment in a personal way. And Srila Prabhupada describes it as purport that Shantaras can merge into kind of an impersonal mood. And when Gopakumar was in the planets of the sages, was it Marjaloka or Tapaloka? He was associated with Pipalayana and other sages, and they were involved in meditation which resulted in a kind of Shantaras. And they were completely satisfied in the happiness that they experienced in just perceiving the form of the Lord. And at one point, Gopakumar, imitating their actions, went into a state of complete just unawareness of himself. And it was almost like he had been asleep, and he woke up and he said, where have I been? What did I do? And he described that to the sages. They said, oh, this is very good. This is a very high symptom. You have been in this great, great stage of spiritual samadhi. But it wasn't characterized by interaction with the Lord. It was characterized by a kind of impersonal, spiritual, almost like spiritual sleep. That's described later when he goes to Satyaloka, to Brahmaloka, when they compare. So Shantala Ras we don't really consider so much. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur is mentioning it because it is a stage. It is a stage of complete freedom from the material energy, and it is a stage beyond Brahman and Paramatma realization. So, now he's going to talk about matter as a dictionary for spirit, and this is an important thing, because sometimes people say, well, you can't describe spirit in words. You can't describe it with mundane vocabulary. And that's true to a certain extent. I mean, the capacity for perception and description through material means is not effective because the material energy doesn't touch the spiritual nature. It cannot accommodate the unlimited expansiveness of it. And the material energy is possessed of qualities which are antithetical. But he says that, and he says this in Jaiva Dharma as well, still it's a tool, and it's the best we have. And we can get a semblance of understanding. As we said before, as above, so below. So in the Bible it says, God made man in his own image. And when the 6 Goswamis describe spiritual relationships, they use different terms to describe different emotional connections. The rasas are an example of that. Friendship, servitude, parental affection, a lover, the different moods of laughter and ghastliness and despair and all these different kinds of spiritual emotion. Our material emotions aren't like them, but we get a sense of what they are by the material. Because actually, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains in Jaiva Dharma, the material energy, the 3 modes of material nature, they have the counterpart of the spiritual energy. The spiritual energy is Sat, Chit, and Ananda, eternity and knowledge and bliss. And they're, what he says, a vitiated or degraded version of each of those energetic manifestations. So there is a conception of existence here, but it's misapplied to the temporary body. But the inclination, the desire to exist, the desire to live, not to die, we carry that here. The desire for knowledge. Everybody's seeking knowledge. People are constantly inquiring. I'm not sure if he says it in this one or another one. Every day people are looking for knowledge. The first thing people do in the morning, what do? They get up, they go out into the kitchen, open up the newspaper, have a glass of orange juice or something and read the newspaper. Turn on the news, CNN. It's Srila Prabhupada, it says it as Bhagavatam purports. The birds, they're inquiring. First thing they wake up, they're chirping. How are you? Where's the worms? What's going on? Everybody's inquiring. This is the nature of the soul. It's always seeking. It's always curious. It always wants to know. And so the senses are always reaching out because this is the nature of Chit. We're not experiencing that full, eternal, ever-expanding awareness of self and our relationship with God. We're experiencing it in a very narrow, small way. But still something is there. And Ananda. Of course everybody wants happiness. Right? Everybody wants to be happy. We're always seeking that. But we're frustrated. But all we have is these material examples. He says they are absolutely necessary for the explanation of spiritual ideas. The Bhagavad believes that the spirit of nature is the truth in nature and is the only practical part of it. So nature, even material nature, has a spiritual quality. That spiritual quality that gives it its energy, that gives it its form, that gives it its motion and life is motivated by spirit. And therefore, we can use this energy to discover spirit. And the Bhagavatam, we get to that, gives that in summary form in the 2nd chapter. about how we gradually, through the process of bhakti, become elevated through the modes of ignorance and passion up to the mode of material goodness, which is a facility. So once we take to bhakti, Maya, who was tasked formally to punish us and to correct us, then uses her same energy in the mode of goodness to give us the capacity for inquiry, for illumination, for detachment, for goodness, for the qualities required to really prosecute bhakti nicely. So, then the phenomenal appearance of nature is truly theoretical, even though it's had its claim on our belief from the days of infancy. That means the experiences that we have in this world are our claim and our conception of reality since we were babies and babies before in previous life. From infancy means from the very beginning of our time in this material world, our whole conception is based on the experiences that we have while in these different bodies. But he says that even though this is not the real thing, it's proof that there is a real thing. Because behind this nature is a creative force of a greater quality. And we have this natural inclination to it. Let's see. This goes on a really long time. I think I'm going to jump to Prayojan. Oh, just the last point. Because because Sambandha means relationship, he says that in the Bhagavad, we've been advised to convert ourselves into the most grateful servants of God as regards our relation to our fellow brethren. Our nature has been described as bearing three different phases: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Goodness is that property in our nature which is purely good, as far as it can be pure in our present state. Passion is neither good nor bad. Ignorance is evil. It is our object to train up our affections and tendencies to the standard of goodness. So ignorance is that quality which just chains us to the needs and desires of the senses without consideration, without regret, without higher aspiration, and which ends up in a downward cycle in karmic reaction. Passion is a great thirst for material pleasure and experience, but it can be utilized properly to gain elevation to higher planetary systems and to conditions which can end up being more conducive to spiritual consciousness. So passion can degrade you, or it can help you to become elevated. Varnashram Dharma was meant to control the passionate tendencies and regulate them in such a way that we don't fall down due to sinful act, and that we gradually become elevated by learning to engage our material propensities and at least acknowledge and recognize they should be engaged in the service of God. And in this way, gradually become elevated. And mode of goodness, this is life like very conducive, because these are the qualities that saintly people have. So then he kind of entreats us to look to all living beings in the same light in which we look to ourselves, and convert our selfishness into all possible disinterested activity towards all around us. So he's telling his stuffy intellectual audience now to come to your higher nature. He's appealing to there's an American president, his name was Abraham Lincoln, and he wrote about the angels of our better nature. For thoughtful people, this cry or call to bring themselves up and to bring up humanity, this rings true. And so in our activities, which are outreach and preaching also, we're always looking for that kind of idealistic, upward searching and upward reaching kind of person. And he says, love, charity, good deeds, and devotion to God will be our only aim. And this is the nature of any true religionist. This kind of quality goes across the spectrum. You'll find examples in every religion, won't you? In Christian religion, there's so many examples of people like this. Even the Muslim religion, there are some very amazing mystics and charitable and polite people. I've met so many in Bangalore. And every religion has these kinds of persons. And then, by that mode, we become the servants of God, obeying his high and holy wishes. Here, we begin to be bhaktas. All this is covered by the term abhideya, the second cardinal point of the supreme religion. So he's what he's going to do here is what he does in his other books, say that ultimately, I think he says this in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that ultimately one day, all the different streams of the different religions will merge into the great current, the great river of this Bhagavad Dharma. That this conception of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the ultimate spiritual quest of every living entity. It's the ultimate destination. And one day, all the religions will be able to recognize that their supreme function and destination is realized in this same practice and in these same ideals. Rather than being threatened, they will be enlivened by it. And we're in the beginning of that process now, right? I don't know, our godbrother here, Bhakti, I don't know if you realize, but he's a preacher. He's like a leader of a Protestant church. And even though he's a devotee in France. And because of his background in devotional practice in bhakti, they like him very much. I don't think he can come out right out and say it, I'm Hare Krishna, but by his natural attainment and accomplishments in bhakti, he's like the perfect preacher and very inspirational to his congregation. I've never really had a chance to talk to you about how you do it, but it must be very interesting for you. Very interesting. He's been doing it for years and years. What a great occupation. It's a real Brahminical occupation. And he's never been bothered by the fact that, it's a different religion. He's bringing people to bhakti according to their eligibility. I think it's really, really amazing. And one day there'll be lots of people like him, all throughout society, in different, not just in the priesthood or the clergy, but in industry, as leaders of industry, leaders of corporation, absorbed in the moods of bhakti and able to imbibe those same moods in the occupational duties of all people. We have another godbrother, Budhara Prabhu, who's trying to take the principles and traditions of bhakti and teach people how to be more successful business people by that. And he's doing another one, Sundar Gopal, the Book of Dharma. They're taking these principles, as presented by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and others, and presenting them in such a way that they're appealing to people, according to their needs, according to their time, according to their place. So when Bhaktivinoda Thakur said in the beginning of this work that we are meant to be not just memorizing and repeating, but we're meant to be satellites, where that light from the Bhagavad strikes us and we reflect it, and it becomes more beautiful and more accessible. See, the light from the sun is not available in the nighttime, but when it strikes the satellite of the moon, it becomes reflected and it becomes transformed, and it nourishes and nurtures the entire world in a completely different way than the sun does. Very, very beautiful thing. So all of us, no matter what our status, can take our level of realization and share and benefit others from it. And this is what he's saying. So, I'm going to give a brief description of Prayojan. He says, what is the object of our spiritual development, our prayer, our devotion, and our union with God? What is that? People ask you that. Hey, what do you guys believe in? What's your goal? Have you ever been asked that? Ever wondered how to answer? Sometimes it's kind of hard. You get a little tongue-tied. Bhakti, well, the object is not enjoyment or sorrow, but continual progress in spiritual holiness and harmony. This is our goal. We want to live in spiritual holiness and harmony with God. Oh, who's going to object to that? That's a very uplifting kind of sentiment. He goes into this other part I'm not going to get into, and I want to continue, but just in brief, because he's talking to this audience, he's trying to overcome their objections with the Bhagavatam. And in the 5th canto, there's these descriptions of hellish planets, which are absolutely ghastly. And he admits that these descriptions are more fearsome than anything that Dante or anybody has ever written about. Kumbhaka, living on a planet where your whole life is in boiling oil. For God knows how long. And anyway, on and on, so many descriptions like that. And he says, these were written by great kings in the past to try to control the lusty population, to put the fear of God in them so that they would act properly. Bhagavad somewhere tells us that not all these stories are true. They're metaphorical stories. Because there are some metaphorical stories in the Bhagavatam.
Puranjana.
Puranjana. He doesn't say these are metaphorical, but he kind of word juggles a little bit. Where he says, don't worry about that. That's not the main thing. And he says that these were made, and when he says by great kings, that means like Manu and others. Manu, he was a king, and so he wrote these, that's true. And it was to regulate people, and it was to put the fear of God in people. But he's saying that also the reason they have it in is because the Bhagavatam is written in such a way so that you can throw out all the other literature. But it has to be inclusive enough to have all the elements of the other Vedic literature. So in the other Vedic literature, there's something about heaven and hell. So the Bhagavad has something about heaven. But that's really not what it's about. Don't worry about that. In a way, he says, he hints that it might not be true, but he doesn't say that it's not true. He's like this really expert. If you were a lawyer and you were parsing his words, you would, because when I first read it, years and years ago, I said, hey, Bhakti Thakur says it's not true. And I said, great. But then when I read it years later, I said, wait a minute. Sometimes our Acharyas, they cheat us a little bit, they cheat the common man, huh?
Well, Bhakti Thakur was a lawyer.
Yeah.
And he was even a high court judge.
Yeah.
So if he wanted to argue a case, nobody could defeat him.
Yeah.
One more point.
Yeah.
Like when we first read these, the 5th canto came out in 1975.
Yeah.
You remember?
Yeah. Caused a huge uproar.
And Shamarani remembers, painting the paintings of the different tortures that are going on, as described in the hellish planets.
Right.
They had like an assembly line. But there's a picture of Srila Prabhupada who's actually looking at the paintings that they made in his 5th canto. He's seeing them for the first time after the book is printed. And he's kind of laughing, he's kind of smiling. And I remember at that time, like reading this. But one thing was that kind of helped. Number one, it's not eternal.
Right.
Because Christians, that's the whole flaw of their entire philosophy. That you get one life, you blow it, bye-bye forever.
Right.
And eternal suffering. So in the Bhagavatam, it doesn't say it's eternal.
Right.
And it has a time limit. Then there's another point which is made in there. Like, for example, when the Yamadutas are taking you to Yamaraja's court, So there's a certain perception of time because it's happening on the subtle plane to the subtle body.
Right.
And time can be expanded like millions of times compared to what it actually is.
For us.
Right,
Correct. Correct.
Right. And then there's another third point, this is the last point that I'm making, is that, the whole conception of the Vedic philosophy is that all the living entities, they're given an opportunity on whatever level that they're on to progress.
Mm-hmm.
So when living entities finally come to the human form, which is only meant for worshiping the Supreme Lord, there is no other purpose to the human body. And when they finally come there, and they actually become progressively more and more destructive, demoniac, evil, they take on all the qualities of the demons, then Krishna himself says in the Bhagavad Gita, I put them down again and again into the lower species of life. But what is that? It's actually mercy, because he's beating out of the jiva this evil tendency, so that they get another chance, they again come to the human form, and they're given a chance to become pious again, and ultimately to become a pure devotee.
Right.
So all those factors, even though we accept that those punishments are real, but there's some aspects, like these points that I'm making, that enabled us to digest this without any problem. Because actually, ultimately, it's Krishna's mercy.
Right.
It's not his wrath, like the angry, jealous God, and you're getting damned forever.
Right.
Because this is what intelligent people in the West, they mock that.
Right.
And they just completely abandon Christianity, Christian conception, because it's so ridiculous. How you say God is merciful and God is loving? Well, what is this?
Right.
But the Vedic conception shows, yes, he's the supreme loving personality, but he has a system of justice within his universe, and everyone has to go according to that system.
Reformation is the goal, though.
That's right, reformation. And at the same time, at any point in this time period, when you're being given all this heavy punishment, there's also the mercy factor.
Right.
And like, for example, in the Vedic system, the word putra, which means son, this is why everybody wants a son in the Vedic system, because
Right.
the word putra means one who delivers the father from hell.
Right.
So, and this is an actual fact, because if the ancestors have fallen into hellish condition, their descendants can perform ceremonies for their benefit. And this is real. It's not like some imaginary purgatory conception in Catholicism, but this is the real fact, that through mantras, through their execution of the Vedic process, they can actually free that jiva from the hellish suffering that he would have to undergo for millions of years.
Right.
Yeah. I just wanted to.
That's good. That's good. That's it in a nutshell. Demiraj used to tell this story about the Scottish preacher,
It's actually Prabhupada's story.
Calvin, and he's talking to his congregation from the pulpit.
It's a
And
good.
the mighty Lord, and he's speaking to the kindly Lord, he looked down upon the suffering souls, a burning in the fiery hell, and he looked down upon them, and I saw the Lord above, and I told Lord, we didn't know, we did it again, Lord, oh, please, Lord, and the Lord, he looked down upon the fallen, suffering soul, and it said, you know now, don't ya? He said, you ken the new, but I don't know if you know what that means. That's Scottish. You ken the new. You know now.
And then it's connected with the newspaper story.
Anyway, so I was going to conclude this part by, now this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He's going to say some prayers. He's going to offer some prayers about prayoja. And he says the Vaishnav, and listen to the language. The Vaishnav meekly and humbly says, Father, Master, God, friend, and husband of my soul. Remember how earlier he said the 5 progressive stages? He's giving each of them Father, Master, Shantaras, God, friend and husband of my soul. Hallowed be thy name. I do not approach you for anything which you have already given me. I have sinned against you, and now I repent and solicit your pardon. Let thy holiness touch my soul and make me free from grossness. Let my spirit be devoted meekly to your holy service in absolute love towards thee. This is a beautiful, complete prayer. Everything is in here. He's praying, recognizing Krishna in all of his 5 features, in all of his rasas. He's extolling the glory of the holy name. He's saying, I'm not asking you for anything. You've already given me life. Everything I have and own is according to your will. We don't ask. Vaishnavas don't beg the Lord for anything. He's giving the mood of repentance and regret, which he explains later is the primary mood of purification. And there's so many of his songs, and the sons of Narottam Das, like we heard this morning, have that mood. And let thy holiness touch my soul and make me free from grossness. Elevate me above this bodily conception, the attachments of this material body. Let me see my soul. Let my spirit be devoted meekly to your holy service in absolute love towards thee. Anyone in any language who expresses these sentiments, God is going to hear that. He's going to hear that. He's giving them the language of the perfect prayer. And then he says, I have called, this is like Arjuna practically on the battlefield. I have called you my God, and let my soul be wrapped up in admiration at your greatness. Shantaras. I have addressed you as my master, and let my soul be strongly devoted to your service. Dasaras. I have called you my friend, and let my soul be in reverential love towards you, and not in dread or fear. I have called you my husband, and let my spiritual nature be in eternal union with you, forever loving and never dreading or feeling disgust. Father, let me have enough strength to go up to you as the consort of my soul, so that we may be one in eternal love. Peace to the world. Imagine Bhaktivinoda Thakur sitting in front of that group and expressing these sentiments to them, and the kind of inspiration they must have felt. You know, these are Christian people. Every intellectual had a Christian background back then. You know, they prided themselves in that. And he was this man, this Indian, Hindu, educated, but they still felt he was somewhat inferior. And some of them were envious of him. But to hear these sentiments from such an exalted, pure soul, whom we know to be Gaura Shakti Sarupaya, the very empowered embodiment of Srimati Radhika herself, to get the mercy of hearing him declare these spiritual sentiments in their own language, in the most poetic and exalted way. It must have been an incredible thing. I just wonder what they came out thinking afterwards, you know. I'm going to skip on. Wait, what time does this end?
4:15.
4:15.
Yeah.
Okay. He's going to. Let's see, is it here? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay. In the next part, part 2, he's going to go into great detail about the philosophy of the Bhagavatam. He's going to go into Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana again. He's going to explain how this is a compilation, an explanation of the subtle and very difficult to understand aphorisms of the Upanishads and the Vedanta Sutra. He's going to explain how Jiva Goswami, in his Sandarbha, took this same approach, and he's actually going to explain the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami in English language. Now, again, this morning we heard that actually our aspiration should be to enter into the emotion and have greed for Leela and abandon Tattva. That's not exactly what he was saying, but Chaitanya Maharaj is on a roll right now where he's really getting into the Leela Katha, which is important. But without being grounded in the teachings of Jiva Goswami and our other acharyas into the meaning of this Leela and its actual nature, then we always run the risk of committing offense to these pastimes by taking them to mundane or trying to imitate them or not understanding them in their proper way. So he says this. Okay, so it says there are three distinct parts: Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojan, which he sort of analyzed briefly. And then he says that the Vedanta Sutra explains Upanishads, and the Bhagavatam explains Vedanta Sutra. Okay. And he says now he's going to explain what he says, the transcendental epistemology, a summary of the Tattva Sandarbha. You know what the word epistemology means?
Yes.
Who? What does it mean?
It's the second branch of philosophy after metaphysics. And it means how man knows the nature of the mind and how man attains knowledge.
It means
So you can have
the study of what is knowledge and how do we understand knowledge. How do we come to know? How do we distinguish what is knowledge, what is not? Yeah, so it's a complete branch of philosophy. So when people think that we're some kind of sentimental cult, if you've ever tried to pierce the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami, they are profound. And he's going to break them down, giving a summary. And it's very similar to his to the presentation of Dashmula Tattva, where the basic tenets of our philosophy about the nature of God, the liberated soul, the conditioned soul, Maya Shakti, 7 principles of Sambandha Gyan, 1 principle of Abhideya, the process, and 1 of what's the ultimate goal. He's going to explain it like that, translate Tattva Sandarbha for us. Now let me ask you this. Sometimes when I'm talking like this, I'm thinking, boy, this must sound really dry. I wonder if people are even following this at all. I could jump right into Bhagavatam and discuss the 6 questions of the sages. We could go into the commentary. I was planning to do that, the 10 subjects of the Bhagavatam and the first 3 shlokas, which are an overview of the entire Bhagavatam, based on the commentary of Srila Prabhupada and Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. We could do that, or we could do one more day of this kind of grinding tattva. To me, it doesn't seem grinding because I really enjoy the words of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but I'm just sitting here, and I'm just wondering, God, because, like, Chaitanya didn't want to come, he's like, I can't take it all right now. I just want to enjoy it, and read the talk. Yeah, the Leela, which is good. I mean, he's put in a lot of time on the other subject matters. He's lived in Vrindavan practically 30 years, been chanting, lacquer rounds for like 2 decades, he's earned it, and he doesn't abandon this, but can you follow this? Is this relevant to your life, or is it too dry? I don't want to continue for a whole, another 2 days, if this is like inaccessible and like, because I know what it's like to sit in that kind of class.
What do you think of my subject, Mother?
philosophy is
Huh?
What do you think of my subject?
Yeah,
Is
I'm
it
wondering,
considered-
So what were you going to say? You were. Did you raise your hand? Oh, you did, yeah.
You're the only person who's talking about this dimension of perception of these things.
Yeah.
And I love it. And I think for those of us who desire to preach, I think it's essential.
One vote.
You want to take the full vote?
No, everybody else being polite. Oh, I don't know more.
I got another hand.
Nobody wants to say, yeah, really, it's kind of dry and boring. But, yeah, like when you started to talk, I thought, that's kind of fresh, you know, a nice breath of fresh air. Because sometimes I hear myself just going on and on and on. And, you know, when you're the speaker, sometimes you don't really, you're not aware of everybody. And I try to make the eye contact. And when I am making eye contact, a lot of times I'm just seeing like this
Butterflies.
glazed eyes, you know. You know, there's a story that our Bhagavad Maharaj tells. One time he was sitting with Gorgovindra Maharaj in his hut, and all of a sudden this big grasshopper, Bhagavad sitting in front of the desk with a grasshopper falls on, sits right there, and he's chanting and chanting. And
It was abnormally large.
yeah, really big one, looking at him. I didn't know what to do, he was a little startled. And then he looks at Gorgovindra Maharaj and says, oh, you know who that is? No, Maharaj, who? That's Lord Indra. What? That's Lord Indra. He's seeing you chant your japa and he's afraid you want his position. Oh, well, what do I do? Well, you tell him that you're just chanting for another goal, you're not interested in his position as Lord Indra, and don't be worried. So, Lord Indra, I'm not interested, I'm only chanting for the love of God. And then it flew away. But he's never really sure whether Gorgovindra Maharaj is pulling his leg or not. Anyway, who knows? Maybe that butterfly is coming to hear some tattva. Or just laying on Gurudev's shoulder and be an ornament. Anyway, this next part, the thing is, there's some really interesting stuff about the process of bhakti and how it works and how it's different from other systems. It talks about the ascending process of knowledge, the descending process of knowledge, a comparison between that kind of acquisition of knowledge based on one's own sense experience or collective experience of everybody else, all put together like an encyclopedia, and then the descending process where knowledge comes down, and then the motivations of people, which he calls active and passive hostility versus loving subservience. And active hostility is somebody who's simply atheistic and concerned with material gratification. Passive hostility is where you want renunciation from everything in this material world, but you don't want to serve God, you want to merge and become one with God. But then there's a relation to that was the innocent person seeking realization of impersonal Brahman because that's all they know. But they're not envious, that's just the only stage they've come up to. So there's anyway, all these terms, and it's kind of interesting. So maybe tomorrow we'll spend one day on that. One day on that. And then we'll go into some sections of the Bhagavatam itself. Because otherwise, I don't want everybody to dry up and blow away from too much tattva.
No, sometimes it's, we know a lot, what we have read and so, but to present it in a language that a common person can take it, this is sometimes difficult.
Yes.
Here,
he
can do it.
He can do it. He can do it. Yeah. Well, you're really philosophical. He's German. See, Germans, that's like one of the cradles of philosophy. All the philosophers that Srila Maharaj quotes and Srila Bhakti quotes, most of them are German.
Even Prabhupada, he said that, in all the world, the German scholars are the ones who took the Vedas. And anybody that knows Sanskrit, they will be highly, highly regarded because the Germans were actually on the top of the European scale of achievements, even technologically, more than 30 years ago. They had advanced beyond all the other Europeans.
I've read that there are more collected works, Vedic works in Germany than there are in India. Like there are certain Upanishads you can't find copies of, ancient copies in India, but are in Germany. during that period of scholarship in the 1800s, first half of that century, when so many scholars were there, Germans were really, and for the most part, had a little bit more honor for it, whereas the English and others were trying to use their scholarship to erode the conceptions. Of course, that's Max Muller, but in the end, but in the end, he regretted his earlier works and made apologies and spoke about the actual glories of the Vedas.
I was just going to make my comment in response to what you were asking us to give you feedback. And I missed the first half of your class because we had to get shaped up. I really was regretting that. Because yesterday, was it yesterday when you gave your first class?
Yeah.
Or the day before? Yeah. I mean, it was astonishing, actually, the way that you presented this famous lecture of Srila Bhakti Thakur. And any one of us who really, really wants to understand what Lord Chaitanya's movement is, because that's what we're doing in our life. And our acharyas, especially the contemporary acharyas, the achievements and the direction that they took in their preaching is all important, because they made, milestones. They established milestones of progress in bringing this knowledge to the entire world. And it's so fascinating, especially Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, because all of our acharyas, they've all declared that we are, all of us in this modern day, meaning Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, all of his disciples, everyone coming from this line, we are in the Bhaktivinoda Dhara. And that means like a stream. And we are in that stream, which is coming from Mahaprabhu's ocean and Rupa Goswami's divine rivers and Srila Bhaktivinoda. We're in that particular Dhara.
Right.
And it just so happens that this Dhara, this stream, is the only stream that has actually brought Mahaprabhu's mission and the highest teachings ever on this planet to the entire world.
Right.
And it's only happened within the last 150 years, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he wrote his book, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, His Life and Precepts, and sent it to the West in 1896.
Right.
And prior to that is when these lectures were going on.
This is about 150 years ago.
This is the foundation of our entire movement.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating to see how this incredible genius and empowered pure devotee descending from Goloka to bring this knowledge to the entire world, how he did it. And in that time period, so difficult to preach to the British,
Yeah.
I mean, they were so puffed up and proud that they're the lords of all they survey, and all these Indians, we're going to reform them and make them into Christians and this and that. And here's, one of those highly educated Indians who's now going to reverse the entire tide. How he does it, this lecture is proof of that.
Right. This is
So it's amazing to analyze the way that you're doing it, breaking it down, sentence by sentence, and how they would perceive what he's saying. I think it's incredible. It's fantastic.
All right.
That's
Okay, then we'll go on with it. See, I was just afraid that it was too detailed and too, I don't know.
Dry?
It's not dry to me.
No.
I feel like him, like Prabhupada Maharaj. When I read, I just go, wow, wow. Because our modern acharyas, Srila Gurudev, what was the first book that he was told to translate? Jivadharma. And that is, I don't know, that in some ways that's like his grand opus. That's one of his great, great contributions to the world, is that Jivadharma. And he himself has said that he read that how many times?
More than 100.
More than 100 times Gurudev has read that book. And the songs we sing in the morning, Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote, 1,000 songs at least? And in them, all of the philosophy, Gaudiya Vedanta philosophy is there. He started Namhata, the going from village to village and converting a small group and starting a preaching group that expanded into another, that expanded into another. the entire foundation, philosophical and behavioral, the outreach, the evangelical aspect of the modern Bhakti movement was established, and he empowered Srila Saraswati Prabhupada not only for that, but for Mayapur, Navadvip, and Vrindavan Parikram, the reestablishing of Mahaprabhu's birthplace and all of the holy sites. Everything the Goswamis did in Vrindavan, he did in Mayapur. Alone, they had at least a group, and they were in a time that they had their challenges, the Muslims, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the challenges that he was confronted with, modern atheism and the British attacks, intellectual attacks, was just incredible.
And the reputation of Vaishnavism.
Yes, how far it had come down.
Yeah.
How much the entire Vedic culture was completely eroded.
Even the Hindu intellectuals were rejected.
Right. And then those that were intellectuals, starting these Arya Samajas and the Ramakrishnas and all of them, Vivekananda, complete misrepresentation. And he took it all on and was able to not only cut jungles, but present the highest things. Jaiva Dharma, the last section, it's describing the spiritual world in detail. And this is how he's describing it so a Western mind can grasp these complex spiritual topics. And so I thought that if we hear this, that like you were saying, it gives us language and a framework that we can not only understand it ourselves better, because it hits certain points in our capacity to understand, but also in our capacity to communicate.
In a mood of respect.
Oh.
He's respecting the people he's talking to, which I think sometimes
Good point.
we can
He's
forget.
demanding that. Love, compassion, charity. These are the qualities of a Vaishnava. The people must have felt rather awed and humbled that this person of such magnificent character and power was delivering this lecture, and in a humble way. Our Guru, on the other hand, was not always like that. He'd come back to know Thakur, though you can tell by his language how accommodating he was.
But he had to be at that
Yeah.
time. That strategy, like Prabhupada's style, wouldn't have worked at that
Right.
time at all.
At the same time, when you read this very closely, while he's making accommodations for all religions, etc., at the same time, he's showing to those that have the eligibility to see that actually he's pointing, he's not saying that everybody's the same. He's actually pointing and giving us a direction for something greater and higher. But for those who don't understand that, he's giving them a reason why they would want to read this literature, why they would want to come to it. And I think that's one of our challenges as well, right? Because what did he bequeath? He bequeathed to the modern world the value. Today we heard about Narottam Das Thakur, Srinivasacharya, and Shamananda. They were the first ones who were tasked with transcendental book distribution. By the request of Janava Devi, the Gaudiya Vaishnavism in Bengal, after the disappearance of Mahaprabhu, had branched out into many different divisions. There was a great confusion. What is the proper Siddhanta of Mahaprabhu? There are many different sects and Apasiddhantas coming up. So she requested, Jiva Goswami, please send these literatures that Mahaprabhu requested. Whatever you've got, send it. And then these three were tasked. They went with these single copies that Jiva Goswami had on papyrus and paper. He got that paper from Akbar. That's another story. And they took those books and had them copied and spread everywhere. But when Bhaktivinoda Thakur, by the time he was ready when he began his preaching, it took him like 11 years to get a copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita. In his early search, he couldn't find a copy of that. But by the time of Bhaktivinoda Keshavaraj being enrolled in university, like in the early 1900s, it was part of the curriculum. So from not being able to find a copy in Bengal to being the curriculum in the University of Calcutta or wherever it was, what influence did he have? Pretty amazing. Amazing. So he established the importance of this book distribution, which Srila Gurudev, and outreach and compassion, which Srila Gurudev has always requested from his disciples, and which, if you analyze his life's work, which is really what he came to do, he came to deliver these higher conceptions of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, to put us on this progressive path, and to write literature to share with the world. Because it may be that one day, these computers and the internet, it may collapse. There are many different ways this could happen. But books will always be there. Books last for generations and centuries. And so any of you that really want to tap into the mercy of our Sampradaya, not only study and read these books, but share them in this language of Bhaktivinoda Thakur should give us some tools to encourage and inspire others to want to read these books. So we'll stop here. What is it supposed to? I got confused today. I thought I was supposed to be at 5. So I shaved my head.
It's on your wall.
Well, I didn't get it. It's, I'm kind of spaced out.